She smiled through pain, serving with a broken hand, never letting anyone see her struggle. But that night, a stranger in the corner was watching. When her tray shattered and her manager humiliated her in front of everyone, he finally stood up. And what happened next shocked the entire diner. In the bustling heart of Nairobi, where the streets are alive with the honking of matatus, the calls of vendors, and the ever-present hum of a city that never seems to sleep, stood a small diner tucked between two aging buildings. Inside, the diner buzzed with tired customers, some stopping by after long hours of work, others simply searching for a warm meal and a quiet moment to rest. The air carried the heavy aroma of fresh bread mingled with sizzling oil, and the rhythmic clinking of cutlery against ceramic plates filled the room like a background song. Behind the worn-out counter, moving gracefully between tables, was a young waitress named Ayana, known by everyone, not only for her delicate beauty, but for the gentlest smile anyone had ever seen. It was a smile that seemed to pour comfort into even the weariest of souls, a smile that made strangers feel welcome and regulars feel like family. Yet behind that radiant expression, a painful truth was carefully hidden, a truth most people overlooked until their eyes lingered a little longer. Her right hand was wrapped tightly in white bandages, the fabric spotted with faint stains from the day's labor. Beneath the layers, her skin was swollen, her knuckles bruised, and every slight movement sent sparks of agony shooting through her arm. To anyone watching closely, it was obvious she should not have been working at all, but Ayana never allowed her pain to control the room. She carried trays stacked with plates using only her left hand, balancing them with a steady determination, moving from table to table with a rhythm that looked almost like a carefully practiced dance. She poured steaming cups of tea, wiped down messy counters, and greeted every customer with warmth, masking the grimace that sometimes threatened to creep onto her face. Her quiet strength was so seamlessly woven into her service that most overlooked her injury entirely, convinced by the illusion of her composure. Still, there were those who noticed. An elderly man at his usual corner seat muttered to another, "How does she keep going like that?" A young woman, stirring her tea absent-mindedly, whispered to her friend, "She should be home resting, not carrying all that weight." Yet no matter the whispers, Ayana only smiled, as if their words had never reached her ears. She had mastered the art of hiding pain beneath grace, of turning suffering into silence, and silence into service. Each movement of hers told an untold story of someone who carried not only the plates and cups of a busy diner, but also the invisible weight of responsibility pressing down on her young shoulders. The truth was simple and heartbreaking. Ayana could not afford to stop. She needed this job, not for luxury or leisure, but for survival, for the little brother waiting at home who depended on her. Every time she felt her hand ache, and every time her body begged for rest, she remembered his hopeful eyes, and that was enough to force another smile, another step, another tray carried across the floor. To the customers, she was just a waitress. To herself, she was a sister, a provider, and a silent warrior fighting through pain no one else could feel. And so, night after night, in that small Nairobi diner filled with chatter and the smell of fresh bread, Ayana smiled through pain, serving with a broken hand that seemed far too fragile for her spirit, a spirit that appeared unbreakable. That evening, as the last glow of the Nairobi sunset faded into the horizon and the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, the diner filled with a softer crowd. Some customers sat hunched over bowls of soup, whispering about their long days, while others stirred their tea absent-mindedly, letting the chatter and clinking of cutlery fade into background noise. At the farthest corner table, nearly hidden in the shadows where the light from the old hanging bulb barely reached, sat a quiet man. His name was Kwame. At first glance, there was nothing extraordinary about him. He was dressed simply, a plain shirt tucked neatly into worn trousers,
the kind of outfit that allowed him to blend seamlessly into the crowd, looking like any ordinary traveler passing through the city. Yet, there was something about his presence that felt heavier, something that made him more than just another face in the diner. He did not speak much, nor did he fidget like the others. Instead, he sat perfectly still, his dark eyes locked on to Ayana as she moved gracefully from table to table. He noticed things most others would miss. He noticed the slight tremble in her left hand every time she tried to balance a heavy tray, the careful way she pressed her arm against her body to steady herself, the way her smile stayed fixed, even when her eyes betrayed a flash of pain. He saw her courage disguised as routine, her suffering hidden beneath layers of determination.
When Ayana approached his table, carrying a steaming cup of tea, her strength seemed to falter for just a moment. Her left hand shook under the weight, and before she could steady herself, the cup tipped, spilling hot tea across the wooden surface. The liquid spread quickly, seeping into the cracks of the old table, dripping down the side, threatening to stain his neatly folded shirt. Ayana gasped, her face instantly flushing with shame. She bowed her head low, murmuring apologies again and again, her voice trembling as much as her injured hand. "I'm so sorry, sir. I didn't mean. I'll clean this right away. Please forgive me." Her words spilled out faster than the tea, filled with panic and fear that this small mistake might cost her the very job she clung to so desperately. But instead of anger, instead of frustration or annoyance, Kwame's reaction was something entirely different. His eyes softened, filling not with resentment, but with sorrow, a kind of sorrow that ran deep, as though he carried a memory of pain that resonated with the struggle unfolding before him. He did not raise his voice, he did not scold, he did not even reach for the napkins placed on the edge of the table. He simply looked at her, long and steady, as though he were seeing more than just a waitress with a broken hand. It was as if he were seeing the weight of her life pressing down on her shoulders, the quiet battles she fought every day, the strength she tried to protect with nothing more than a fragile smile. Ayana, flustered, kept wiping at the table, bowing again and again, refusing to meet his gaze. But Kwame did not look away. He kept watching her, silently, his expression heavy with unspoken words, his mind turning with thoughts no one else in the room could guess. In that silence, in that lingering stare, there was a feeling, an unsettling sense that this man knew more than he should, that his sorrow was not only for her mistake, but for something greater, something Ayana herself could not yet imagine. Late into the night, when the last buses had stopped running and the glow of Nairobi's streets had dimmed into soft pools of light under flickering lamps, the diner grew quieter but heavier with exhaustion. The air was thick with the smell of oil, soap, and overworked bodies. Ayana's movements had slowed. Her bandaged hand, hidden beneath the worn strips of cloth, had borne far more than it could take. She carried tray after tray, her left arm trembling under the weight, her jaw clenched each time she shifted her grip to keep something from falling. For hours she endured in silence, her smile unwavering, though her body begged her to rest. And then it happened, the breaking point. A tray stacked high with half-empty glasses and chipped plates slipped from her weakening grasp. In one sharp instant, gravity claimed it all. The crash rang out like thunder across the diner, shattering the fragile illusion of calm. Glass exploded into glittering fragments across the floor. Plates split into jagged pieces that scattered under tables and chairs, and the sound echoed against the walls, freezing every conversation mid-sentence. All eyes turned to her. Ayana stood paralyzed, her face pale, her hands trembling, her lips parted as if to apologize, but no words came out. She bit her lips so hard it nearly bled, fighting back the tears burning at the corners of her eyes. Part 2. From behind the counter, the manager, Oba, stormed forward.
His face was twisted with frustration, his voice booming louder than the crash itself. "You're too weak," he barked, his finger stabbing the air like a weapon. "You're slowing everyone down. This place is no charity. We don't need liabilities." His words cut deeper than any shard of glass on the floor. Ayana lowered her head, shoulders curling inward as if trying to make herself small, invisible, anything to avoid the shame pressing in on her from all sides. She wanted to cry, but she swallowed the pain, choking on silence, because she knew tears would only make her look weaker. Inside her chest, her heart pounded, heavy with fear. She could not lose this job. She could not. At home, waiting for her was her little brother, the boy who depended on her for food, for school, for everything. Without this job, his world would collapse alongside hers. The thought struck harder than Oba's insults, keeping her feet rooted even as her dignity crumbled. The diner, usually buzzing with clinking cups and murmured chatter, had fallen into complete stillness. Every customer froze, some staring in pity, others in quiet judgment, but none stepping forward to defend her. The shards of glass glittered on the floor like cruel stars, a reminder of her failure. The silence grew suffocating, stretching longer, heavier, until it was unbearable. And then, in that silence, came movement. A chair scraped softly against the floor. A figure rose. It was the quiet man at the corner table, the one who had been watching all night, the one whose eyes never missed a single tremor in her hand. Kwame stood, his tall frame commanding the room without a word. He did not rush, nor did he hesitate. He simply rose with an air of calm authority that seemed to shift the very atmosphere of the diner. Every head turned toward him, the silence breaking into a new kind of tension, one laced not with pity, but with anticipation. Something was about to happen. And as Kwame's steady gaze fixed on Ayana, it was clear that the night had reached a turning point, one that no one in that diner, least of all Ayana, could have ever imagined. Kwame walked calmly to the center of the diner, his footsteps echoing against the tiled floor, slow and deliberate, each one heavier than the last. The clinking of silverware, the hushed whispers, the creak of chairs, all of it faded into silence as every eye followed him. He did not rush, nor did he falter. His presence alone carried a weight that made people instinctively sit straighter, as though they sensed something powerful was about to unfold. His face was unreadable, calm but firm, and when he stopped, he stood tall, surveying the room with a quiet authority that seemed out of place for a man dressed so plainly. He looked first at Oba, the manager, whose anger had not yet settled, but whose expression now flickered with unease. And then his gaze shifted to Ayana, who stood frozen beside the shattered glass, her eyes still glistening with unshed tears, her body trembling under the weight of shame and fear. The silence grew denser, pressing down on everyone. And then, in a voice that carried through the entire diner, strong and unwavering, Kwame spoke words that sent a shiver through the room. "Do you even know who I am?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, sharp and undeniable. Conversations that had almost resumed moments earlier now died instantly. Forks hovered in midair, cups stopped just short of lips, and every head turned from one person to another, searching for an answer that no one had. Whispers spread like sparks catching dry leaves, soft at first, then louder, overlapping, nervous, confused. "Who is he?" someone muttered. "A government man?" another guessed. "A police officer?" No. "A politician?" But no one knew. Not even Oba, who prided himself on recognizing every face that mattered in the city, could place him. The manager shifted, uncomfortably, as his earlier arrogance faltered, as though something deep inside him told him he had made a grave mistake. Ayana, meanwhile, stood in stunned silence, staring at the man she had served tea to only hours earlier. She replayed their brief encounter in her mind, his quiet watchfulness, his gentle eyes,
the sorrow she thought she saw in them, and realized there had been something different about him all along. Kwame did not smile, nor did he explain himself immediately. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, moving with the same calm precision he had shown all night. Without hesitation, he pressed one button, lifted the phone to his ear, and spoke a few words so softly that no one could hear them. The line was short, curt, commanding. He ended the call and slid the phone back into his pocket as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Seconds ticked by. Confusion deepened, and then the unmistakable sound of engines roared outside the diner. Within minutes, 3 sleek black cars rolled to a stop, their doors opening in perfect synchronization. Men in suits stepped out, their movements sharp, controlled, unmistakably professional. Gasps spread across the diner, rippling like a wave. People craned their necks to see, eyes wide with disbelief. The tension, already unbearable, now erupted into shock. This was no ordinary man. Oba stumbled backward, his bravado shattered. Customers covered their mouths in astonishment. Even Ayana, who had endured the night with unshakable resilience, felt her knees weaken as reality settled in. Kwame was not just another traveler. He was not just another customer. He was, in truth, one of Africa's wealthiest billionaires, a man whose name carried weight in boardrooms and governments alike. And more than that, he was the hidden owner of the very diner they stood in. Every wall, every chair, every paycheck belonged to him. The revelation struck harder than thunder, turning the ordinary night into something unforgettable. In that moment, the world inside the diner shifted forever. Kwame turned to Ayana, his steps slow and deliberate. And when his eyes met hers, the room seemed to fall into a silence so deep that even the ticking of the clock on the wall felt deafening. His voice, when it came, was steady but heavy with the weight of truth, each word cutting through the air with a clarity that demanded to be heard. "I came here undercover," he began, his gaze never leaving Ayana, "to see how people are treated when they believe no one important is watching. And tonight, Ayana, I saw something extraordinary. I saw your strength." The words were not spoken with pity nor with grandiosity, but with a sincerity so profound that everyone present felt their chest tighten. You smiled through pain no one else would bear. You carried trays with a broken hand. You endured cruelty, humiliation, and exhaustion, and yet you never let your spirit falter. That is not weakness. That is true dignity. The diner was utterly still. Customers who had once whispered now sat in hushed awe, their eyes darting between the billionaire and the young waitress whose courage had just been recognized. Oba, the manager, shifted uncomfortably, beads of sweat forming on his forehead as his earlier anger crumbled into fear. He opened his mouth to speak, perhaps to defend himself, but Kwame raised a hand ever so slightly, and the gesture alone was enough to silence him. Then, without hesitation, Kwame's voice sharpened, echoing with finality. "You are fired. Effective immediately." Gasps rose from the tables. Oba's face went pale, his authority stripped away in a single sentence. He stumbled backward, realizing that the diner he thought he controlled didn't belong to him at all. His reign of harsh words and careless cruelty had ended in an instant, and there was nothing left for him but the sting of humiliation. But Kwame was not done. His tone softened again as he turned fully to Ayana, whose lips trembled, her eyes wide, her entire body frozen between disbelief and hope. "As for you," he continued gently, "this is not the end of your struggle. It is the beginning of something greater. You will not only keep your position here, but I will see to it that you are promoted, supported, and honored for what you truly are, an example of strength." He paused, letting the weight of his promise settle before adding the words that made Ayana's knees almost give way.
And for your younger brother, the one you have sacrificed so much for, I will provide a scholarship. His education will be fully taken care of. You have carried the burden for too long, Ayana. Now it is time that someone carries it with you." At that, Ayana's composure broke. Tears spilled freely down her cheeks, but they were not tears of shame, nor of exhaustion. They were tears of release, of hope, of joy too powerful to contain. She covered her mouth with her trembling hand, whispering a thank you that barely escaped her lips. The girl who had worked tirelessly with a broken hand, who had hidden her pain behind a fragile but determined smile, had unknowingly served a billionaire. And her kindness, her grace under suffering, had altered the very course of her life. Around her, even strangers wiped at their eyes, moved not just by Kwame's wealth or power, but by the undeniable truth revealed before them. And the lesson that lingered in the air, unspoken but deeply felt, was this: true strength is not found in riches, nor in titles, but in the quiet endurance of pain without losing one's light. Life has a way of testing us hardest in the moments when we feel weakest, but often it is in those moments that the seeds of unimaginable reward are planted. For Ayana, that night proved that sometimes grace in suffering is what opens the door to blessings beyond imagination.